Good morning, everybody. I'm very thankful to see you all this morning. I'm thankful to welcome you to what appears to be the beginning of the end of the longest government shutdown in U.S. history, as shameful as that is. I don't think it's coincidental, you know how I think, but it's after 40 days of wandering in the wilderness and making the American people suffer needlessly, some Senate Democrats finally have stepped forward to end the pain. It appears to us this morning that our long national nightmare is finally coming to an end, and we're grateful for that. At least some Democrats now finally appear ready to do what Republicans and President Trump and millions of hardworking American people have been asking them to do for weeks. But as we said from the beginning, the people's government cannot be held hostage to further anyone's political agenda. That was never right. And shutting down the government never produces anything. It never has, if you study history. And so here we are. I want to remind everybody this morning of another critical point that you've heard me here repeat over and over the last several weeks. It's something that I and Leader John Thune and President Trump and every Republican leader have all said repeatedly from the beginning. We have always been open to finding solutions to reduce the oppressive costs of health care under the Unaffordable Care Act. We just made clear that we would not and should not ever do that, that is, negotiate as hostages. And I've also reminded you here every morning at this press conference throughout the shutdown, Republicans have not just been talking about reducing costs and fraud and abuse in so many areas and in health care. We've been actually passing new laws to accomplish that urgent mission for the people, and we will continue to do so. So here's where we are by way of schedule, just so you know, you're following. And if you're not at home, if you're waking up to this good news this morning, the Senate's vote late last night of 60 to 40 opens the door now. The Senate is moving forward on an amended House CR, a continuing resolution, that will reopen the government until January 30th. Added to that are provisions to fully fund SNAP provisions through the end of the next fiscal year, which is September 2026. Guaranteed back pay for all federal workers who have been made to endure these hardships over the last several weeks. And it also includes passage of 3 appropriations bills, which we're grateful to be moving through the process. That is the Military Construction Veterans Affairs bill, it's the Agriculture bill, and the Legislative Branch bill. The Senate will be back in session this morning to finish their job, and we're certainly praying that they do. They'll need unanimous consent from all senators to fast-track their final vote. As you know, there are some procedural hurdles that one or more could throw in the way, but we certainly hope that they won't do that because so many people across this country are desperate for the government to reopen. At the very moment that they do that final vote, I will call all House members to return to Washington as quickly as possible. We'll give a 36-hour formal and official notice so that we can vote as soon as possible to pass the amended CR bill and get it to the President's desk. As you all know, and he said as recently as last night, I was with him, and he told the press, he said, we want to get the government open. He's very anxious to get the government reopened and to end the Schumer shutdown. We all are. With regard to the travel challenges, I spoke yesterday at some length with Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, my former colleague and good friend, and he lamented the serious situation that we have with air travel in the U.S. He's bent over backwards, as all members of the administration and the cabinet have done in all of their areas of jurisdiction, to try to keep the government working for the people and to mitigate the pain and the harm. But the problem we have with air travel is that our air traffic controllers are overworked and unpaid, and many of them have called in sick. That's a very stressful job, and even more stressful exponentially when they're having trouble providing for their families. And so air travel has been grinding to a halt in many places. And as of Sunday, nearly half of all domestic flights and U.S. flights were either canceled or delayed. And it's a very serious situation. So I'm saying that by way of reminder. I'm stating the obvious to all my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats in the House. You need to begin right now returning to the Hill. We have to do this as quickly as possible. Now, we look forward to the government reopening this week so Congress can get back to our regular legislative session. We have a lot of business to do, as you all know, and we will be working in earnest. There'll be long days and long nights here for the foreseeable future to make up for all this lost time that was imposed upon us. I want to close with something that's important. I think it's important to say that this is genuine. I mean this sincerely. We applaud the 7 Senate Democrats and 1 independent senator who did the right thing. They decided to put principle over their personal politics. And my urgent plea of all my colleagues in the House, and that means every Democrat in the House, is to think carefully, pray, and finally do the right thing and help us to bring an end to the pain of the American people. This has gone on too long. Too many people have suffered, and it's long overdue. That's the update I wanted to give you this morning. There are probably lots of questions, but I'm going to get a lot of my own questions answered later today, so stay tuned for more. Thanks so much.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Eternal God, we thank you for the progress we have made on this journey to reopen the government. We refuse to give in to the fatigue of despair because you have filled us with the buoyancy of hope. Lord, you know the hopes of the helpless. You bring justice to the oppressed. You see the troubles we face, for you are our all-wise King. Continue to shower us with your blessings, instructing our lawmakers with your wisdom as you use them for your glory. And Lord, bless our veterans. We pray in your sovereign name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ready? The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., November 10, 2025, to the Senate. Under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Roger Marshall, a senator from the state of Kansas, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Chuck Grassley, President pro tempore.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of the motion to proceed to H.R. 5371, which the clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 168, H.R. 5371, an act making continuing appropriations and extensions for fiscal year 2026 and for other purposes.
Officiated.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I come to the floor today because we are now in the middle of November, and we know that we have open enrollment in our health care plans, and we have consumers trying to make choices, and we need to give them clarity that we can help drive down the costs. As somebody who worked very hard on the Affordable Care Act, and one provision that was different than the exchanges, the basic health plan, I can tell you that this plan has been successful at making a market for consumers at the low end of the market above the Medicaid rate, but up to 200% of the Medicaid rate, and providing them with affordable insurance through something called the Basic Health Plan. It's in 4 states and soon to be in the District of Columbia. And if you think about it, an individual buying on the exchange would probably have to spend about $9,500 to get an equitable silver plan. But these individual states purchasing on behalf of bundles of their constituents are only paying $6,000 for that same plan on an annual basis. So what are we doing, Mr. President? We are basically making a market. I say it's like going to Costco. If you buy in bulk, you get a discount. If you allow these states to buy on behalf of a large pool of their constituents who can't make a market on their own, you obviously can get a discount. So I'm very interested in us continuing and saving federal dollars and delivering good health care on something called the Basic Health Plan. So I'm not surprised that yesterday or the last few days, the world in D.C. anyway and around the country has erupted into this debate about how do we make health care more affordable. That is exactly right. And how do we make sure that big insurance doesn't just capitalize? Now all of a sudden, both sides of the aisle are talking about the insurance companies making the money, and how do we drive down the cost? So I appreciate that, and I welcome the chance to talk to any of my colleagues. In fact, I saw that the Wall Street Journal had an column today basically saying, quote, Republicans pitch alert alternative to the ACA to end the government shutdown. I was glad to see that. I thought that was a great alternative. I don't know how much it was just discussed at your lunch or how many of these ideas of making health care more affordable were discussed, but I definitely think this particular idea by my colleague Senator Cassidy has merit, only because I think the senator on the Finance Committee, along with myself and chairman of the Health Committee, has tried to look at ways to make health care more affordable, and it deserves some fair consideration. This idea is really something called a health reimbursement account. And since 2008, health reimbursement accounts have been a critical component of one state's Medicaid program, the Healthy Indiana Plan in the state of Indiana. Today, over 800,000 Indiana Medicaid enrollees automatically have access to these accounts and are using them to lower their medical expenses. The state of Indiana pays for the first $2,500 in health care costs, which covers a large portion of their insurance plan's out-of-pocket expenses, but the enrollees make monthly contributions depending on their costs to upgrade their health care coverage to more generously include things like vision and dental benefits. And one of the biggest benefits of the Indiana Health Reimbursement Account is that the program encourages good financial management and the use of preventative care like annual checkups. So currently, if an enrollee spends less than the $2,500 in medical costs and uses preventative care, they can roll over their remaining account to the next year to lower their monthly medical expenses. This has been a proven path to promoting responsible and measured healthcare spending. It also encourages, as I mentioned, the use of preventative care, and we all know we need to drive down cost in the long run. What happens when we don't have good health insurance, and as we see November and December coming without a real plan for millions of Americans to buy affordable insurance, we are just going to drive up the cost of uncompensated care. The Affordable Care Act has lowered the amount of uncompensated care and helped us lower the cost of insurance overall, but we need to keep going and we need to do more. So I think that these health reimbursement accounts proposed by my colleague Senator Cassidy, I hope that this article in the Wall Street Journal is serious, that Republicans are interested in floating this idea, and that the Affordable Care Act marketplace coverage has a variety of ways in which we all can take place in a conversation to drive down the cost of care. The health reimbursement accounts already in place in Indiana and here in our federal employee health and benefit program, and also in the D.C. health exchange as well. So it's not as if there's only one place that is doing this. In those instances, it's a voluntary program, so people can voluntarily comply, voluntarily decide to take the program up and participate in, and as I said, get involved in better health care decision and better timeliness of these decisions. So I have no idea, Mr. President, what's going to happen here today, but I know this. There is enough time to talk about good ways to lower the cost of health care, particularly for this population that it has to make benefit decisions right now. Lower these costs, implement this, and get our government back open. I hope that people will give serious consideration to what my colleague, Senator Cassidy, and others have talked about in this very important area of driving down the cost of care. I thank the President, and I yield the floor.
Today is the 40th day of the government shutdown. It's been so long, a recap is in order. As I've said before, Iowans don't plan their lives around what we do here in Congress. But the Democrats' failure to support a clean, bipartisan funding bill has caused pain, suffering, and uncertainty for the American people. Let's remember, it's Democrats who caused the shutdown and got us into this mess. All but 3 Democrats have repeatedly voted against a clean, continuing resolution to fund government, agencies, and programs. Even at the Biden-era levels, they won't even support funding that their Democrats have voted for and supported for the last 4 years prior to Trump's reelection. All we need is 5 more Democrats. There are not any partisan policy priorities from either side. That's why we call it a clean government funding resolution. Republicans, by supporting this continuing resolution, have sought to put partisan politics aside to keep the government open for the American people, while the Appropriations Committee members hash out full-year appropriation bills under what we call regular order. Now, obviously, for the last 40 days, the taxpayers of this country and every citizen see daily demonstrated Democrats have had other plans other than just a clean funding resolution. They have not put their policy priorities to the side. They've taken the American people hostage by refusing to vote for a government funding unless it includes their partisan priorities. Top of their list is extension of the Biden-era COVID subsidy for Obamacare. Now understand, what we're talking about was instituted because we had a COVID shutdown of government and people were hurt because the government decided in early 2020, at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, that 22 million people should be put in the unemployment rolls. That's what happens when government shuts down the economy. So, this is a subsidy Democrats decided to sunset at the end of this year. Now the Democrats shut down the government to continue what was meant to be a temporary program. And something we learn from the word temporary program or temporary taxes is everybody soon decides temporary becomes permanent. These expanded subsidies that go back to the beginning of the COVID era go to big insurance companies for Americans over 400% of federal poverty level. Now, can you believe it? What I mean when I say over 400% poverty level, that could include people making over $600,000 a year. I want to make clear, this expiration is only about the expanded temporary COVID subsidies. So everybody else that depends upon the subsidy for Obamacare, I want to make very clear to them that the premium subsides for individuals and families under 400% of the federal poverty level that existed prior to COVID are permanent law, and those people will not be affected because that permanent law is not being changed by anything that we're debating here today. Permanent law, no change for those under 400% of poverty. Now, Mr. President, writing health care policy is our job, meaning the senators' jobs and House of Representatives' job. However, every one of us in this body knew that this deadline that we're talking about was approaching, and we had already made plans to address the policy issues later in the year. Yet, as we find out now for the last 40 days, that timeline was not satisfactory to the Democrats. I've been in the elected office a long time, and taking government hostage and shutting it down is always a losing proposition. It costs money to shut the government down. It costs money to open the government up, and we find out little is accomplished. In the process, government's supposed to be service to the American people, and when there's 700,000 federal employees sitting at home, probably going to be paid because they always have been paid, they can't serve the American people, and the government is not doing its job. So in my view, this shutdown was doomed from the start. But Democrats marched forward anyway, following their leaders into the mess that we now have had for the last 40 days. On day 38, now 2 days ago, so 38 days after government shut down, Leader Schumer came to the Senate floor and unveiled his big plan. On day 38, he came with the Democrats' first plan, get the American people out of this government shutdown. Now, why would he wait 38 days? Why would he wait? If you were serious about a bipartisan solution to lower the cost of health care for the American people, I don't believe you would sit idle for 38 days before making an offer. I've shared the pain the shutdown has inflicted upon Iowans, but it bears repeating. I have families calling my office, asking where they can get food. Our food banks are overrun as Thanksgiving is just a few weeks away. Now, I want to give you an example that was reported by the person behind this constituent in the checkout line. One of my constituents, while grocery shopping at Walmart in Marion, Iowa, was left with no groceries for her family when she found out at the cash register that her food stamps were not on her debit card. That kind of uncertainty has real-world impacts. The realization brought this constituent to tears, it was reported to me. And why wouldn't you go into tears? Let's just take a moment to think about how you would feel coming home empty-handed from the grocery store and the stress it inflicts on families. Perhaps your kids are crying because they're hungry. Young farmers can't get their loan money from the Department of Agriculture during this government shutdown. And these young farmers are already in an ag economy that's underwater. How are they going to keep their business going? And then I don't know what percentage of the American public flies every day, but it's significant that flights are being canceled left and right because air traffic controllers aren't being paid. That means people who are trying to get to a sick family member or attend a sister's wedding may not make it on time. Law enforcement, including our own Capitol Police that we rub shoulders with every day here, are working overtime and not being paid. The entire federal workforce is not being paid. 3 million people who have families and bills to pay. Now, that's just 4 or 5 examples. Unfortunately, the list could go on. I often say Washington, D.C., right where we're standing now, this town and the people that are in it live and work in an island surrounded by reality. I've been begging Leader Schumer to give just 5 Democrats the go-ahead to join us in a common-sense, clean funding bill. Let me remind you that Democrats voted for this same structure of a clean funding resolution at least 13 times during the 4 years of President Biden. So I would ask them, what's wrong with voting for a clean funding resolution during this year and during this shutdown, or to prevent this shutdown? The answer is the American people elected a new president, and that president is not a Democrat. Well, elections have consequences. In a democratic republic, the will of the people is exercised by voters, and congressional leaders must respect that and live with the consequences. It's past time the Democrat leaders cut loose their members who want to work in a bipartisan way. Iowans at my town meetings want more bipartisanship out of Washington. They're cynical that all we do is fight and nothing ever gets done. I try to educate them on how it's not as bad as what they see on TV, and senators really do want to legislate and serve the American people. So let's roll up our sleeves, get the job done. The American people deserve better. I yield the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm honored and proud to be here today with the presiding officer in the chair, a veteran, albeit of the Navy, not the Marine Corps, but accompanied by a fellow Marine, Senator Sullivan, to whom I will yield shortly. Especially honored to pay tribute to one of the nation's most storied and steadfast institutions in the history, the entire history of our nation, the United States Marine Corps, which marks its, in Philadelphia, a new fighting force was born, a force of grit, determination, and unshakable loyalty. Since that day in 1775, Marines have answered every call without any exception, with courage and conviction, not because it was easy, but because it was right. The motto of the Marine Corps, Semper Fidelis, always faithful, is more than just a phrase. It is a lifelong commitment, and as we know, there are no former Marines. There are no ex-Marines. It is a lifelong commitment and identity. Semper Fidelis speaks to the bond between Marines, to the cause they serve and to the nation that they protect. That bond by no means ends with active duty. It continues in communities across America where Marines continue to serve, living out the values of America as teachers, first responders, public servants, and leaders. The Marine Corps has fought in every American conflict, from the Revolutionary War to the War on Terror on the beaches of Iwo Jima, to the frozen mountains of Korea, in the jungles of Vietnam, and in the sands of Fallujah. Marines have stood their ground. They have led from the front, often at great personal cost, with no expectation of glory. Telling the story of America is impossible without telling the story of the United States Marine Corps. Their sacrifices have safeguarded our freedom. Their discipline has inspired generations. Their traditions of toughness, honor, duty have stood the test of time. Historic battles exemplified the Marine Corps' unyielding commitment to courage, sacrifice, and duty, and they define the very character of our military. Derna, Chapultepec, First Bull Run, Belleau Wood, Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, the Chosin Reservoir, Khe Sanh, Hue, Hue, the liberation of Kuwait, Fallujah, and Helmand Province. Marines have not only fought our wars, they have also responded to humanitarian crises, assisted in natural disasters, and stood sentry in times of peace. They are not just warfighters, they are ambassadors of American resolve and resilience. This milestone, 250 years, is an opportunity to reflect, to honor, and to recommit. We honor the thousands of Marines who never made it home, who gave their last full measure of devotion, as the saying goes. We honor the Gold Star families who carry their memory every single day. We honor the wounded in body and some in spirit, whose lives are forever shaped by their service. We honor every Marine, past and present, who has earned the title with sweat, sacrifice, and a fierce sense of purpose. Let me acknowledge as well the families who stand behind every Marine, spouses, children, parents. They serve quietly, often without any recognition, but always with deep devotion. Their strength sustains.
Mr. President.
Colonel of Marines and Senator from Alaska, Semper Fi.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank my colleague, Senator Blumenthal, and the presiding officer for his great service as well. We do know the Marine Corps is part of the Department of the Navy, so we're all related here. I won't say what I used to say to my father, who was a Navy officer, but in response to that. But it is an honor to be on the Senate floor here with Senator Blumenthal, my colleague and fellow Marine. You know, there's a lot of frustration going on here in the Senate. We're trying to get this government reopened, pay our workers. People are suffering. But I do think it's also important to switch gears, come down here in a bipartisan fashion to pass Senate Resolution 124 by Senator Blumenthal and myself on commemorating the 250th anniversary of the United States Marine Corps, a truly remarkable milestone by one of America's most remarkable institutions. And that happens tomorrow on November 10th, our birthday, the Marine Corps birthday. Now, we Marines, Mr. President, you know this, take our November 10th birthday very seriously. No matter where Marines are, anywhere in the world, deployed, they always take time to celebrate the birthday of our beloved Corps on November 10th. Everybody in the Marine Corps wishes each other a happy birthday. We also are kind of proud of the fact that we're the only military service that was founded in a bar. Yes, that's true. Tun Tavern, Philadelphia, PA, was where the Marine Corps was founded. And at our birthday celebrations, we do a lot. They're great celebrations. If you haven't been to one, anyone watching, I encourage you to go to a Marine Corps birthday ball. You will have the time of your life. You will come away filled with a sense of patriotism and pride, whether you served in the military, in the Marine Corps, or not. You will love it. At these birthday celebrations, we, of course, as Senator Blumenthal mentioned, remember our fallen. We recommit ourselves to keep the Marines the world's finest fighting force, which it is and has been for decades. And we take time to recognize not just the Marines present, but in particular the oldest and youngest Marines present. We have a very solemn cake-cutting ceremony. In fact, after the birthday cake is cut, with the Menluk sword, the guest of honor presents the first piece of cake to the oldest Marine present, and then he hands that piece of cake off after he takes a bite to the youngest Marine present, signifying the passing of heritage and culture and tradition from one generation to the other. Now, Mr. President, last night there were two special Marine Corps balls that I cared a lot about. One, the one I really cared about, was in Anchorage, Alaska, hosted by Delta Company, 4th Law Enforcement Battalion. I was very honored and set to be there as the guest of honor last night. This is an Alaska Marine Corps ball. We have such a great time. I've been going to that ball for years with my wife, my daughters, friends, fellow Marines. And alas, given the work that we're doing here in the Senate to reopen the government, I was not able to attend. A huge disappointment for me. Really, really wanted to be in Alaska with my fellow Marines and my family. There was also another Marine Corps ball, Mr. President, last night. It was actually in D.C. here, the Commandant's Ball. And at the last minute, I thought, hey, if I can't be in Anchorage, I'm going to at least celebrate the 250th with the Commandant, some top generals, top enlisted Marines, a couple of my Senate colleagues, Senator Ernst, Senator Daines. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, was the guest of honor. By the way, Mr. President, he's the first Marine Vice President ever, so got a lot of shouts and recognition last night. But the Marine who stole the show last night, Mr. President, was the oldest Marine, Corporal Nels Mokler, 99 years old, born in 1926, Iwo Jima Combat Marine, D1, looking as strong as he did when he was an 18-year-old corporal storming the beaches of Iwo Jima last night. He was there. The place went nuts when he was recognized. A 5-minute standing ovation for this great American hero. What a moment. Finally, Mr. President, to the Marines on the birthday of the Marine Corps by the Commandant of the Marine Corps, the 13th Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Jean Lejeune, in 1921. And he issued this statement, this message, and ever since then, since 1921, every single Marine Corps birthday celebration for over 100 years has been read, has had this proclamation read. It was read last night in Anchorage. It was read last night in D.C. And for the Marine Corps balls today and tomorrow on November 10th, it'll be read there. And here's what it says, Mr. President. Remember, this is from 1921, but it kind of gives you the sense of how we feel about our illustrious Corps. A message from the Commandant of the Marine Corps, republished in the United States Marine Corps Manual, edition 1921. On November 10th, 1775, a Corps of Marines was created by a resolution of the Continental Congress. Since that date, many thousand men have borne the name Marine. In memory of them, it is fitting that we who are Marines should commemorate the birthday of our Corps by calling to mind the glories of its long and illustrious history. The record of our Corps is one which will bear comparison with that of the most famous military organizations in the world's history. During 90 of the 146 years of its existence, the Marine Corps has been in action against the nation's foes. From the Battle of Trenton to the Argonne, Marines have won foremost honors in war, and in the long eras of tranquility at home, generation after generation of Marines have grown gray in war in both hemispheres and in every corner of the 7 seas, that our country and its citizens might enjoy peace and security. In every battle and skirmish since the birth of our Corps, Marines have acquitted themselves with the greatest distinction, winning new honors on each occasion until the term Marine has come to signify all that is highest in the military efficiency and soldierly virtue. This high name of distinction and soldierly repute we who are Marines today have received from those who preceded us in the Corps. With it, we also receive from them the eternal spirit which has animated our Corps from generation to generation and has been the distinguishing mark of the Marines in every age. So long as that spirit continues to flourish, Marines will be found equal to every emergency in the future, as they have been in the past, and the men of our nation will regard us as worthy successors to the long line of illustrious men who have served as soldiers of the sea since the founding of the Corps. Mr. President, you've heard that before. That's the message for the Marine Corps birthday from the Commandant of the Marine Corps, Jean Lejeune, issued in 1921.
Good afternoon, everybody. From the very beginning of this year, Donald Trump and Republicans have failed to deliver on their core promise to lower the high cost of living in the United States of America. In fact, what Donald Trump and Republicans said is that costs were going to go down on day one. But costs haven't gone down. They're going up. Inflation is going up. Under Republican policies, housing costs are going up. Child care costs are going up. Grocery costs are going up. Electricity prices are through the roof. And now, because of the Republican refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, tens of millions of Americans are about to experience dramatically increased health care costs. In some cases, their health insurance premiums will increase by $1,000 or $2,000 per year. That is unacceptable. It will be unaffordable for working class Americans, middle class Americans, and everyday Americans to be able to go see a doctor when they need one. And so House Democrats and Senate Democrats have been fighting hard to address the Republican health care crisis and to lower the high cost of living for everyday Americans in the United States of America. Because the reality is, America is too expensive. And far too many people are struggling to live paycheck to paycheck. They can't thrive, they can barely survive. And that's why Democrats have been waging this fight. And we'll continue to wage this fight. No matter what comes over to us from the United States Senate to the House of Representatives at some point this week. Our position as House Democrats has been crystal clear. We will sit down with any Republicans, anytime, any place, anywhere, in order to find a bipartisan path forward, but we're not down with their my way or the highway approach to governance. That's failed the American people. It's been a disaster for the American people, and the American people know it, which is why last Tuesday, Republicans all across the country got wiped out. One of the most decisive off-year elections ever in modern American history. And so as House Democrats, we know we're on the right side of this fight, the right side of the American people. And we're not going to support a partisan Republican spending bill that continues to gut the health care of the American people. And we're going to continue the fight to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. And if it doesn't happen this week, this month, next month, then it's the fault of Donald Trump, House and Senate Republicans, who continue to make life more expensive for the American people. Questions?
Mr. Leader, some Democrats in your own caucus are suggesting Schumer is ineffective as Senate Democratic leader and should be replaced. You, of course, are critical of this deal. Do you view him as effective, and should he keep the job?
Yes and yes.
Mr. Jeffries, do you trust, in this deal, there is language for President Trump and the Trump administration to reverse some of the firings that happened during the shutdown. Do you trust that the Trump administration and the president is going to sign off on that and reverse the people who have been fired?
We'll have to evaluate the legislative language, and we'll have a caucus meeting later on this afternoon, and we'll get a presentation from Rosa DeLauro, the top Democrat on the Appropriations Committee. The overwhelming majority of Senate Democrats, led by Leader Schumer, are opposing this bill in the Senate. And they'll articulate, there are a variety of different reasons that the bill is being opposed strongly by Democrats in the Senate, the overwhelming majority of them. And there'll be a variety of different reasons that we articulate in the House. Now, certainly we're going to continue to stand by our hardworking federal employees. By the way, Donald Trump and Republicans, this toxic administration, they fired more than 100,000 federal employees prior to the shutdown that they started beginning. So, of course, there's reason to be deeply skeptical of the administration and their motives as it relates to the hardworking federal civil servants and the federal workforce. And we will continue to be deeply skeptical of their intentions. They spent the whole year implementing the toxic parts, the most toxic parts of Project 2025, after lying to the American people last year, saying they didn't know anything about Project 2025. And part of that has been going after the federal workforce. So we'll see what the language looks like, but it doesn't change the core problem here, which is we need to decisively address the Republican health care crisis on behalf of working class Americans, everyday Americans, and middle class Americans. Thanks. Third row.
So Dr. Oz said that millions.
Who?
Dr. Oz. There are millions of phantom enrollees under the ACA. Is that being looked at as it possibly makes it so that people that are on the ACA are paying more, it's inflating the numbers?
That's like the most random way to start a question on a serious topic. Nobody who's serious in this country takes Dr. Oz seriously. No one. And, I mean, it's shocking that the guy even was confirmed. But this is part of the reality of Republicans here in the House and over in the Senate. They're nothing more than a rubber stamp for Donald Trump's cruelty and extreme agenda.
Are the phantom enrollees being addressed, though?
I have no idea what Dr. Oz is talking about, and neither do the American people. Now, with respect to the Affordable Care Act, here's what I do know. That Republicans have tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act more than 70 different times. in the last 15 years. They don't operate in good faith when it comes to the health care of the American people. And of course, as Democrats have repeatedly indicated, we're open to sitting down and having a bipartisan conversation about how to fix our broken health care system overall. But I'm not going to respond to any comments from randos like Dr. Oz, who is woefully unqualified to be in whatever position he holds in the administration. He's a joke. These people are jokes. But the issue of the health care of the American people is very serious. And that's what we'll continue to focus on. Back row.
Do you see in the Senate bill the extension of SNAP benefits rather than the possibility of a January cliff for them? Do you see that as a victory, or is that something that also raises questions?
Here's what I understand about the SNAP situation. Republicans this year, on July 3rd, subsequently signed into law by the current president, enacted the largest cut to Medicaid in American history, ripping away health insurance from at least 14 million Americans, and at the same period of time, cut $186 billion from SNAP. Republicans did that this year. They literally ripped food from the mouths of hungry children, seniors, and veterans so they could reward their billionaire donors with massive tax breaks that they made permanent. That's what Republicans did. They've launched an all-out assault on SNAP. They've weaponized hunger and starvation here in America, taken SNAP benefits away from more than 1 million veterans rather than honoring them tomorrow, which is what should be taking place in the United States of America. Republicans have done that. And so these people can't be trusted on the cost of living issue. These Republican extremists, they can't be trusted on the health care issue. And they certainly cannot be trusted on the SNAP issue.
As you know, this has been the longest shutdown in American history. You've seen chaos at airports, delayed SNAP benefits, people losing their jobs. And yet, the deal that Democrats agreed to has been a deal that's been on the table for a while now. Still no policy outcome on health care. So what do the American people gain from the past 41 days?
Our fight in the House of Representatives will continue to address the Republican health care crisis. We'll continue that fight today, tomorrow, this week, this month, next month, this year, next year. We're going to continue that fight to fix our broken health care system and lower the high cost of living for the American people. And the American people know that we're on the right side of this fight. It's part of the reason why you saw decisive Democratic victories last Tuesday and crushing Republican losses all across America. In Virginia, in New Jersey, in New York, in Pennsylvania, in California, in Mississippi, in Georgia, across the country, up and down the ballot. Because Republican policies have failed the American people. And as Democrats, we're going to continue to fight to make their life better. Thanks.
Throughout the shutdown, you referred to your Senate colleagues as courageous for rejecting the 14 previous attempts to reopen the government without an extension to the affordable tax care credits. Those 8 Senate Democrats who voted to start the process of reopening the government, do you still include them in that characterization of courageous Democrats who have kept the fight going throughout this shutdown?
Well, I don't have much to say about those individuals, and they're going to have to explain themselves to their constituents and to the American people. I certainly believe that Senate Democrats, the overwhelming majority of Senate Democrats, led by Chuck Schumer, have waged a valiant fight over the last 7 weeks, defeating the partisan Republican spending bill 14 or 15 different times, week after week after week, and continue to oppose this effort of passing legislation that does not address the Republican health care crisis by extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits. But the fight is getting ready to shift back to the House, where we're going to work hard, hold the Republicans accountable. All of these loudmouths on the House Republican conference side who's been saying for the last several weeks that we have to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. Now is their chance. This week, they have to come back from their 7-week prolonged taxpayer-funded Republican vacation. They can no longer hide. They can no longer hide. Mike Johnson apparently still hiding. Refused to even answer a single question today. That's extraordinary. But they're not going to be able to hide this week when they return from their vacation. Thanks.
Speaking of the House, Speaker Johnson has not committed to holding a vote on subsidies, even though the Senate agreement would have them do so. What do you say to that? And then also, what do you think that would do to the relationship between Republicans and Democrats on the House side?
Well, the failure of Republicans to address the health care crisis that they've created in the House and in the Senate is no surprise, because House and Senate Republicans multiple times this year have been given an opportunity to vote to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, and multiple times this year already, in the context of the debate around their one big ugly bill, they voted against, unanimously voted against, extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits. So over the last several weeks, it's become increasingly difficult for them to hide from their position as it relates to the health care of the American people. And House Democrats, joined by our colleagues in the Senate, we're not going to stop the fight. We're going to continue to lean into the fight over the next few days and beyond until we actually get an outcome that makes life better for working class Americans.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. There's already extensive backlash coming from the Democratic base over feeling shortchanged by Senate Democrats who have secured this deal without touching on health care. What do you think that this backlash could mean for the party going into the midterms next year, and also for the voters who just handed Democrats a decisive victory? Do you think that this will make them feel also shortchanged, disenfranchised, demoralized? Do you think that this will lead to a switch-up?
House Democrats are going to take back control of the House of Representatives next year. I've said it before, and if I said it, I meant it. Now, with respect to the senators on the other side of the Capitol, they're going to have to explain themselves. But the overwhelming majority of Senate Democrats continue to remain in the arena fighting to fix our broken health care system and address the Republican health care crisis. This fight for us is not partisan. It's not a partisan fight. It's a patriotic fight. We're waging this fight on behalf of the American people. The 5 states that are most impacted by a failure to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits are West Virginia, Wyoming, Alaska, Mississippi, and Tennessee. 45% of the people, of the Americans who are going to lose health care or be at risk of losing health care if they don't, on the other side of the aisle, extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, 45% of them are registered Republicans. 35% registered Democrats, and 20% unaffiliated or independent. This is not a partisan fight for us. It's a patriotic fight. You know, one of the people that I met early on during this Trump Republican shutdown, came to Capitol Hill, was a 29-year-old named Mariah Plant. She's from rural Wyoming County in West Virginia. Her older brother is nonverbal, autistic, and requires 24-hour care. And Mariah is able to provide that care to her older brother lovingly and affectionately because of Medicaid that Republicans have now cut by the largest amount in American history. Her hospital in rural West Virginia is at risk of closing because of Republican policies in their one big ugly bill. And at the same time, this 29-year-old loving caregiver for her older brother gets her health care from the Affordable Care Act. And it's affordable because of the tax credits that Republicans now want to rip away from her. And so I'm fighting for people like Mariah Plant. Very different than the people that I represent in Brooklyn, New York. But she's an American, just like I represent hundreds of thousands of Americans. And that's what House Democrats are doing. We're fighting for the American people.
Thank you, Leader Jeffries. Have you spoken to your Democratic colleagues in the Senate who voted to reopen the government? And if so, what do you make of the argument that Republicans would not discuss health care during the shutdown, so they said there's no choice but to vote yes?
I have not spoken to them. Thanks.
Different topic, Mr. Leader, if you don't mind. President Trump announcing widespread pardons for the group of people that were involved in providing alternate electors, as they called it, for the 2020 election. And he also has allegedly received a commutation request from Ghislaine Maxwell. Just wondering about your thoughts about the way the president has handled his pardon power, especially given how critical he was of President Biden.
Well, Donald Trump, in terms of the exercise of his pardon power and commutations, is completely and totally out of control. Like, he can find the time to pardon a serial fraudster like George Santos, but can't find any time to sit down with Democrats on Capitol Hill who represent half the country in order to address the health care crisis that Republicans have created. That's devastating people in urban America, rural America, working class America, small town America, the heartland of America, and black and brown communities throughout America. And so what we're seeing with these toxic pardons and commutations coming from Donald Trump is more of the same. And look, the American people know these extremists on the Republican side have gone too far. And the crazy part about it is that they went too far on day one of Donald Trump's presidency. And it's been downhill ever since. On day one of Donald Trump's presidency, this guy pardons hundreds of violent felons who brutally beat police officers, 140 of whom were seriously injured. Life-threatening injuries in many cases. And then unleash these people on communities all across the country in ways that put those communities at risk. And what we've seen from Donald Trump since day one, since those toxic pardons of those violent individuals, is more of the same. From a person who promised to lower costs on day one, but doesn't give a damn about the American people. And what has taken place over the last 41 days is that the American people have seen Democrats fight for them, fight to make life better for them, fight to drive down the high cost of living for everyday Americans, and fix our broken health care system in the face of this overwhelming Republican assault on the health care of everyday Americans. And Republicans continue to stand up for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected.
Thank you, Leader. Whether fair or unfair, Leader Schumer is taking a lot of heat from members of your own party. Why do you think he is the right leader for this moment, and why do you think he should stay leader of Senate Democrats?
Yeah, as I've indicated, listen, Leader Schumer and Senate Democrats over the last 7 weeks have waged a valiant fight on behalf of the American people. And I'm not going to explain what a handful of Senate Democrats have decided to do. That's their explanation to offer to the American people. What we're going to continue to do as House Democrats, partner with our allies throughout America, is to wage the fight, to stay in the Coliseum, to win victories in the arena on behalf of the American people, notwithstanding whatever disappointments may arise. That's the reality of life. That's certainly the reality of this place. But we're in this fight for all the right reasons. Because the extremism that has been unleashed on the American people is completely and totally out of control. Life hasn't gotten better for everyday Americans under Donald Trump and compliant Republicans. It's gotten worse. And the American people know it. And we've got to continue to stay in this fight until we end this national nightmare. And that's our commitment to the American people. We're in this fight until we end this national nightmare and can get back to a place where we continue America's long, necessary, and majestic march toward a more perfect union. Thank you.
Sorry.